Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Welcome back to Dr. Darnise's House of Religion, Magic, and Conjure. Um, hey, how we all doing? Well, I guess we can't pretend that all is well. Here we are in this time, um, dealing with the death of yet another Black person at the hands of the police in this society. And it's been difficult. It's already a difficult situation in terms of COVID and those restrictions. It's already difficult dealing with police brutality and, just average white people acting up and wanting to call the police on us. But now there's just continued the death cult. I would have to call it that. So yesterday was especially difficult because that's when, George Floyd, that's when all the news broke and things have been happening in Minneapolis. Anyway, so I was reminded about the words of James Baldwin. So this video is really about James Baldwin and this particular book, The Fire Next Time. Now, I teach this book every semester in my Intro to African American Studies class. And I teach it because it is so relevant. James Baldwin is, I think, the greatest writer in American history. You might disagree with me on that. This particular book came out in 1962. And James Baldwin, if you're really not familiar, go on YouTube and search. As I would tell my students, use the Google machine, it's your friend. But James Baldwin left us so much richness in the whole body of his work, but particularly in The Fire Next Time. And, he's absolutely my favorite. And I tell my students all the time, you know what, you have to, whatever else you do in this class, do not skip a Baldwin reading. It'll be to your detriment and you'll never catch up in this class. So I'm going to assign that to you too. Never miss a Baldwin reading. So first of all, look, it's this short, right? But Baldwin is such a genius with words. He's so succinct in this text, and it's so prophetic for where we're living now. It's unbelievable how prophetic it was and it is. Because in this book, this little slim volume, that, believe it or not, students act like they can't find time to read. In this slim volume, Baldwin talks about the race relations problem in America. And he summarizes it accurately, succinctly, and powerfully. And I don't think that it's been done quite as well. And many people would agree with me. And it hasn't been done as well as James Baldwin did in The Fire Next Time. This is an essay where he describes his own upbringing as a child growing up on the streets of Harlem to becoming a man, and what that was like for him as a Black person, as a Black boy growing up in Harlem and becoming a man in this America in 1962. And so what he's telling us about being a boy, Black boy becoming a man then, is the same thing that we're having to tell our Black children today. It's the same thing. So in the beginning of this book, he has a poem, a letter that he writes to his nephew. And the letter is called My Dungeon Shook, letter to my nephew on the 100th anniversary of emancipation. And he's explaining to his nephew about how to conduct himself in white America. And it's the talk. We call it the talk that Black parents have to have with their Black children. How to navigate through a society that considers you suspect and criminal just on sight. So he writes a letter to his nephew, who is about 15 or 16 at the time, explaining to him this is how it is. And he tells him one thing that's really, really important. The whole thing is important. Don't let the hate that they have towards you get on the inside of you. If you do, you'll be destroyed from the inside. So no matter how much they hate you, don't let that get on the inside of you. And then he goes on to tell his own story, that he was 14 when he starts talking about his own experience here. I underwent during the summer that I became 14 a prolonged religious crisis. And he situates it along his maturity in the Christian church, because he says that although the Christian church is problematic, it's the thing that Black people have that allows Black people to survive. And he said, I realized it was flawed and maybe even morally bankrupt, the Christian church. But that you couldn't just take that from Black people, because then what else would they have from flying into despair? So he realized, okay, well, it's necessary, it provides a role. But also, here's what the Nation of Islam offers. So he talks about, Christianity, how it functions, how it fails Black people. Talks about the Nation of Islam, how it functions, and how it fails. So if you watched my previous video about Black nationalism, I talked about, is it time for a resurgence in Black nationalism? And Baldwin was always a critic of Black nationalism. Not entirely. He says, I get it. I know. Because the hatred of white people against Black people is so enormous and so unreasonable, so irrational, that when Malcolm speaks, Black people know that Malcolm knows what he's talking about. Malcolm speaks for Black people. He doesn't tell them, don't feel what you feel, right? By, the late 60s, mid 60s, Martin Luther King was starting to lose some of his authority, at least in the North, is what Baldwin tells us. Baldwin says, people not trying to go to church no more because they don't want to hear turn the other cheek. They're not trying to hear that. And Malcolm X says something different. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad says something different. So he says, I recognize that there is a reason Black people go towards the Nation of Islam. And he goes, but I don't think that that's really the solution for America, because it just means that we go from a country based on white supremacy to a country based on Black supremacy. And he goes, I don't think that's going to work. He said, it might make us all feel good for a minute. He says, but that's not going to work. Not for the sanctity of America, because we are all in this together and we're all related by now. We're related. And so this book is so appropriate for where we are now. This book, The Fire Next Time, we are literally in the fire right now. Y'all know that in Minneapolis there were protests, right? Riots, some would say. There were protests. And people said, why are they protesting and rioting? Why are they destroying things in their own neighborhoods? We hear this repeatedly, right? Why does that happen? And Baldwin already answered that for us. See these flames on the cover of this book? Baldwin already answered that here. Part of the reason this book was extremely well received and considered extraordinary. This little book was considered extraordinary, and it still is considered extraordinary. And one of the reasons is because Baldwin said, the reason I wrote this is for white people, for white liberals. He said, because you ignore Black people and you ignore the problems that Black people face at your own peril. Because what you think is that Black people are going to just destroy their own neighborhoods. And he said, oh no, that's not it. He said, Baldwin said, oh no. Whatever gated community you live behind, no matter what place where you think it's secure, no, it's not, because we're coming to you next. We will burn down this entire nation unless you pay attention. He says the biggest sin is moral apathy. If you are not a racist white person, but you do nothing in the face of racism, you allow it to exist as if it's just the way things are. He says you're morally apathetic. You don't care enough to make anything different because it inconveniences you. So you don't care. He goes, so then you are the problem. You're the one who thinks that going away somewhere in your own home is going to protect you. So he wrote this for white people to say, let me explain to you what Black life is like. So that's why he tells us via his own experience of a boy growing up on the streets of Harlem in the 60s, well, really in the 50s, what it was like for him growing up and so many other Black people. And he says there's a point at which as a young person growing up where you realize there's life on the avenue, he calls it. The avenue is riddled with people who are on drugs or prostitutes or alcoholics, whatever. He says they go on the needle out of sheer frustration and realizing that there's no outlet for you, there's no place for you as a Black person in America. What are you going to do with that? Your dreams, your aspirations as a young person, and you want to go out into the world and explore and be yourself and achieve something. And you realize that there is no place for you. He says some most go on the avenue and they go on the needle. Unless you have a way out. And he says, I consider myself lucky that I found a way out through writing. But he says, but most don't. And so what white people need to realize is you are creating this continual underclass. And they are not benign, because there will come a point when they burn the entire thing down, you included. So if you are that liberal white person, if you are that well-meaning white person who is not racist, then it's up to you to prevent the fire next time. Right? So he's like, this is coming to you. This is coming to your doorstep. So when I saw, the fires and everything in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, I thought, wow, it's the fire next time. And also, if you know your Bible at all, it comes from the story of Noah, right? Where in the end of that story, the great flood, and Noah and the ark, right? They find a place finally to settle. And God sends a rainbow. And the rainbow is considered a sign that where God makes a covenant with humanity and says, I will not destroy the world again by water. The fire next time. So that's where you got to really pay attention to the fine print, because God did not say, I will not destroy the world again. God said, not by water, it'll be the fire next time. So Baldwin says, this is my warning to you, white people. There will come a time, if you don't address this, if you remain morally apathetic about the plight of Black people and Native American people he mentions in here, then you are going to be destroyed. So it's so profound, this book. It's so profound. And, if you have some time, and, even if you have to make some time, I really just suggest that you read this book. Again, it's just a slim volume. It's so relevant and profound right now. Yesterday I was just posting on my Facebook page just quotes from Baldwin. Just posting quotes from Baldwin because he already told us. He's like, this is what's getting ready to happen. So anyway, I just want to come on here and highlight Baldwin, but to also offer us something, a way that we might think of as we try to navigate life in these times. And this is what helped me yesterday, is thinking about Baldwin and noticing the ways that Black people are calling out white people. Say, what are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about this? And so it's really interesting to watch what's happening and to see the white evangelical Christians, right? What is Christianity's answer to this? What is Christianity's answer to racism? So Baldwin says it's already morally bankrupt. Du Bois said it too, if you watch my video about Du Bois. The Christian church is morally bankrupt because it accepts slavery and it accepts the dehumanization of whoever it considers to be the underclass. So it is already morally bankrupt. So if you call yourself a Christian, are you going to do something about that? Or are you going to go along with it because you're morally apathetic? Anyway, so it's really, really good stuff. And anyway, for such a time as this, uh, he critiques religion, Christianity, and Islam here, and talks about, what he thinks would be better. So anyway, if you've read this, I'd love to hear your comments, or if you've read other Baldwin work, I would love to hear that as well. You see, I'm feeling very literary, and I've got some books going on here behind me, because I'm feeling very literary uh, in this episode. Thank you for joining, and especially if you've held on, because this has been a bit long of a video here, but thank you for supporting. Like, share, support. Put it on your own Facebook page if you feel like it. And as always, support via Patreon. I appreciate it, all that good stuff. So anyway, that's going to do it for this time. And yeah, bye for now.